All right, ladies and gents, let's start talking about the muscles of the back and the shoulders. Okay, so the muscles that we're going to be discussing in this part of the video series are the dorsal muscles on your cat, right, as well as the posterior muscles of the back in a human. Okay, so we're going to start up here in the shoulder region and work our way downward. Okay, so there's going to be several videos of this section. If you look at your table, you notice that there are lots of videos that include lots of parts on your table that include these muscles. So these are a little bit confusing with some of the descriptions and how I have it, because the way I list it in your table, part of it is based on the cat's anatomy, but also part of it is based on how humans used to look at some of this stuff and how actually physical therapists and things like to think about these muscles, because there are problems that are associated with these muscles because they're large and carry out lots of things and there's lots of parts of them. So by breaking down these different parts, it can help you understand what's going on. So just some notes to say here for you guys. The muscles of the back and the shoulders are a little bit confusing as we go through. Okay, there's quite a bit going on in the back. There's a lot of muscles that are involved, a lot of muscles that deal with your scapula, a lot of muscles that deal with your humerus and forearm and motion there. Okay. So the way I have it on your table, I have it listed like, for example, the trapezius in humans, right? I have it broken down into different parts, okay? So with the cat name. Those names are also applicable to humans, okay? That's just describing that part of the actual muscle. Your trapezius is large, okay? So I have included origin, insertion, actions for each of those things in each of those smaller parts. So as we go through, it'll make sense as I start to describe them. My recommendation for you is to take those parts that I start to go through for the muscles like the trapezius. I'll go over it as a whole. You can memorize all of that for the trapezius, or you can memorize the smaller parts for each of the different muscles that I'm going to continue on describing. So their individual origin, insertion, and action, and you can record that in your table. So either way is fine with me. Okay. My recommendation is that I personally prefer to memorize these in smaller chunks, because when you go back to take your practical exam, if I show you the trapezius muscle and you only remember the origin part for the acromiotrapezius and you write that down, that is fine with me for that entire muscle. Okay, so it gives you a little bit more information that you might have to memorize, but it gives you a better chance of getting a correct answer on the test. Okay. So let's start describing these muscles. The first muscle that we're going to look at here, all right, this muscle is the trapezius. All right, the reason why it's called the trapezius is because it looks like a trapezoid. So if you follow the shape, right, you got one side here, one side here, one long side here, one side here. Okay, so like a trapezoid. So those of you in geometry, right, it's a shape with two parallel sides, all right, and then angles going on each of the other ends. Okay, so trapezius, trapezoid. With the trapezius, okay, the muscle overall I have listed here, the origin, insertion, and actions, okay? Trapezius, its origin, occipital bone and spinous process of the thoracic vertebra. Occipital bone and spinous process of thoracic vertebra. Okay, so all of this is completely acceptable to write for the origin, right? You're going to have to write it all for the trapezius, okay? So if you memorize trapezius muscle as is, you're going to have to write for me all of that information. Insertion. Clavicle and scapula. So a better way to say that is acromion process and spine of scapula. I would prefer you write acromion process and spine of scapula, because that you can tell here if you look, acromion process, spine of scapula on this part of the muscle, occipital bone, thoracic vertebra, all the way down, trapezius there. Okay, so in that center part. Actions. If you look here, there are a lot of actions associated with the trapezius. So elevating scapula, adducting scapula, depressing scapula, rotating scapula, elevating clavicle, and extending and hyperextending your neck. So your trapezius, if you like have a hard day's work, right, your muscles are sore, sometimes you carry a lot of tension in your trapezius. So that's that muscle up here. Okay, so your trapezius muscle, right, if you massage your shoulder right here, that's that muscle you're actually feeling right now. Okay, so all of these things are valid actions. Remember, you only need to describe one. So I'm going to go describe the smaller parts of these muscles. Okay, so this is very similar to what it is in your cat, and these are very how you can partition your trapezius muscle. Okay, so clavotrapezius. If you look here, these are the things you have to memorize. So it's a lot less complicated than memorizing the trapezius, and you're going to learn each of the different parts and what they do a little bit better. Okay. So clavotrapezius, all right, it's going to originate on the occipital bone and it inserts here on the clavicle. Clavotrapezius, it's the most superior part of your trapezius muscle. Okay, so clavotrapezius, think in line with your clavicle. It's going to be more superior than the rest. Its action, elevate scapula and retract scapula. That is what it's doing. So this upper part, when it moves, all right, it's moving your scapula. You can feel it on your back. Next part, acromiotrapezius. Okay, so this is the part of the trapezius that deals with the acromion process of the scapula. Okay, so it's going to deal with that part. It's the middle portion of your trapezius. Okay, so the center part. With your acromiotrapezius, all right, its origin, spinous process between the 7th cervical and 1st through 3rd thoracic vertebra. So if you look here, this cervical vertebra, T1 through T4. Okay, so that's where you're going, or T3, you're going to find it here. It inserts on the spine of the scapula. So if you look here, that's the spine of the scapula. Actions, it's got two. So retracting the scapula or adducting the scapula, you can say it, record it that way, as well as elevating the scapula. So all of these are valid, proper ways of describing the action of the center part of your trapezius. So this is where your shoulder blade is. It's that muscle in the center band of your back. All right, the last part of the trapezius, so there's 3 portions to it, is the spinotrapezius. So this is the part that deals with the lower spine. It's the inferior portion of your trapezius muscle. It's going to originate on the spinous process from the 6th through 12th thoracic vertebra. So it's going to go from T6 to T12 all the way down this way. It inserts on the spine of the scapula. So actually it undergoes onto the inferior side of the spine of the scapula, but that portion of the trapezius is going to be there. All right, its actions, it retracts and depresses the scapula. Okay. So again, when I ask you questions about the trapezius muscle, okay, you can describe the trapezius as a whole. So occipital bone, spinous processes of the thoracic vertebra. You can write this insertion in one of these actions. That's fine with me. If you memorize clavotrapezius and write this stuff, that's fine with me. It's still part of the trapezius. Acromiotrapezius, still part. Okay, and lastly, spinotrapezius, all parts of your trapezius muscle. So again, any of that stuff is fair game for when you're describing that muscle for me. Okay, spinotrapezius, clavotrapezius, and acromiotrapezius, those are how they're described in the cat. And when we do the cat dissection on the back, you'll be able to see the actual parts of the trapezius as separated. But humans have them as well. Okay, they're still a portion. They're just defined by that chunk of that muscle. Right? The trapezius is a very broad, large muscle. Okay, there's lots of stuff that's happening there. Okay, let's move on to the deltoid. So the deltoid muscle, shoulder, right here, deltoid. With your deltoid muscle, it's the way I did it is very similar, exact same way I described your trapezius muscle. So I broke it up into the 3 parts. Again, 3 parts. The reason why I do that is because they all get exercised different ways. They all get worked out in different ways. They all do different actions. Okay. So deltoid. The name, as is implied, it's deltoid. It's actually triangular shaped. Okay, so delta in Greek, it's this letter. Okay, so the delta means change. Those of you that's in chemistry or physics, so delta is a symbol, right? That's triangular shaped. So deltoid, it's your triangular muscle here on the shoulder. Its origin. It originates on the clavicle and scapula, so you can think of the acromion and the adjacent scapular spine. So when we think back, that's pretty similar to another muscle's origin. That's your trapezius, right? Very similar to that. Insertion, deltoid tuberosity of humerus. Okay, that's the insertion for your deltoid muscle. All of it's going to that point right there, if you see. All right, and adduction of shoulder is its main action. So if you look here again, I've got the 3 parts of it. You have the anterior deltoid in the front, medial deltoid in the center, and posterior deltoid to the back of the body. So again, any of these descriptions I about described for the deltoid is fair game for when I ask you questions about the deltoid. All right, so clavodeltoid, all right, or you can call it anterior deltoid is another way they call it. In the cat, it's actually called the clavobrachialis. Anterior portion of the deltoid, origin. Lateral third of clavicle, insertion, deltoid tuberosity of humerus. Actually, in cats, it actually goes all the way down the ulna. And then insertion, right? It's horizontal adduction, medial rotation, and in cats, it flexes the forearm. So when I ask you about humans, all right, I care about what's going on with the human action. Okay, so ignore what's happening with the cat. That's just information for you to know. The middle part, all right, we call it the acromiodeltoid, or you can call it the medial deltoid. Both of those names are acceptable. The medial deltoid here, right, it's the center part of your three portions of the deltoid muscle. It's going to originate on the inferior border of the acromion process of the scapula. So again, acromiodeltoid, it deals with the acromion process of your muscle. Insertion, deltoid tuberosity of the humerus. Okay, so deltoid tuberosity is where most of your deltoid muscles are going to attach. Okay, and then lastly, flex and rotate shoulder and abduction of shoulder. So this is the muscle when you raise your shoulder, right, it's going to flex. All right, and then the last muscle that we're going to talk about here is the spinodeltoid. All right, this is the posterior portion. You can call it the posterior deltoid. All right, it's the middle third of scapula is where it's going to originate. So it actually is going to be on this posterior part here is where it's going to originate. So scapular spine. Deltoid tuberosity of humerus is where its insertion is. So again, that's a pretty good insertion to memorize for deltoids. And actions, so abduction of the shoulder, lateral rotation of the shoulder, and extension of the shoulder. So the nice thing about memorizing it this way is that if you know a term associated with motion and you're dealing with the shoulder, your deltoids are probably going to do it, right? They're related to a lot of motions there. Okay. So the next muscles, these are just normal descriptions like I've done before, and I'll go through again origin, insertion, and actions of these. Latissimus dorsi. Okay, this is a very large muscle. Right, this is on your guys' cats when you keep asking me like, what muscle is this that's flat? All right, on the side that's a flap over there, that's the latissimus dorsi. So if you ever see swimmers, all right, swimmers usually have very large lats. So rowers, that rowing motion that you sometimes do at the gym, right? That's a motion that builds up your trapezius, or not your trapezius, your latissimus dorsi, as well as your trapezius, but latissimus dorsi. Origin. Spinous process of the lower thoracic vertebra, ribs, and lumbar vertebra. So for latissimus dorsi, you're going to need to know all of that. Insertion, you can write intertubercular groove or sulcus of humerus. So remember that on your humerus, it was the space between your greater and lesser tubercles on the head of the humerus. Actions, extension of shoulder and adduction and medial rotation of shoulder. So your latissimus dorsi, it allows for your shoulder to go back. So again, when you do this rowing motion, right, when you pull on something like that and you pull on your latissimus dorsi, that's how you work out your latissimus muscle. Okay. Next muscle, all right, the next group of muscles that we're going to actually talk about are the deep muscles. So these are actually below those. So we'll address those in the next couple of videos. So there's a lot of those, so I'm going to break it down into 2 smaller videos. So again, my recommendation for you is to watch this video a couple times, double check your table. With, again, deltoid and trapezius. They're large muscles. They have lots of different parts. I like to describe them this way in 3 different parts. I think it's just because I've been studying cats for a while. These are the terms that stick to my head. But humans have these parts as well, okay? If you talk to any of your PT people, if you say that, oh, the clavotrapezius part of my trapezius or the upper trapezius like this, they will understand what you're talking about. And that gives them a better indication of where you might have pain or injury in your muscles in the future. Okay. So again, if you have questions, write them down, let me know. Next time I see you, we can answer those. So again, good luck studying.